I mentioned this once before when Crystal and I sang it. That was the song that when we had our choir, we're talking mid-'80s, early 80s. I know Yvonne knows. That was the opening song that the choir would sing every Sabbath coming out. Surely the Presence. In their wonderful, lovely tan robes with the burnt orange sash, or whatever you call the part that hangs on the top. So that song was sung so many times in my childhood, and I didn't know that was the song they were going to sing right now. So when I heard it, I was like, all right, this is set up perfectly. So
that's the way it works.
The feeling of comfortableness that came to me at that point, it was high. So my name is Michael Ahn, and the story, my story, God's glory, this is volume 3 or number 3, I think it says in the bulletin. Whatever it says, because the first week we had Pastor Tyler, and then last week, of course, we had Becky Lanza, and then they said, man, we need to find somebody from the scrap heap, and then it was me. So I realized a couple weeks ago that a lot of you here, actually, this is before thinking about a sermon or talking, know nothing about my life previous to when you've met me here, unless you were here when I was growing up. So today, there's a lot of background I'm going to give. I'm not going to do as much as Becky and go a generation before, but there'll be some background. So at the end of today, at the very least, you'll know more about me, and then hopefully we get some stuff through to you that you go, all right, I'll use that sometime, somewhere, someplace. So I was born in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. I was born in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. Long time ago, but I'm not Puerto Rican. Some people growing up would think, oh, so you're Puerto Rican because you're born in Puerto Rico. No, I'm not Puerto Rican, although Puerto Rico is obviously a close relation to the United States. My parents lived in Puerto Rico for 3 plus years, in the early 70s, and my father was working at a hospital down there, the Bella Vista Hospital in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, and I was born on Thanksgiving Day, the same birthday, first fun fact of the day, the same birthday as Phyllis Berenci. She and I share a birthday. November 28th, the greatest day of the year. In case the rest of you thought your day was the greatest, November 28th is the greatest day of the year. But I was born in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. Obviously, I don't remember that. We moved to Dayton, Ohio, soon thereafter, within 6 months after I was born. My father was doing his residency at Kettering in the mid-'70s. So my first memories are from there. But we lived in Ohio for 3 years. Then we moved to Tracy in August or September of 1978. Okay? My father was an OBGYN, and there was an Adventist-run OBGYN group, Tracy OBGYN, that is right across from the street from the hospital. And second fun fact, the head of that group was the father of Yvonne Miller, Audrey Glover, who was played a humongous part in getting my father to actually come out here, and some people that were also here that he knew from his childhood. So we came to Tracy in 1978, long time ago. My brother was born here in 1978. So my mom and I drove here. My dad flew here. No surprise. In the summer of 78, so my mom was 6-7 months pregnant. We drove to Tracy, and we've been here since then. That's a long time ago. Now raise your hand if you've been in Tracy since at least 1978. And look around, because you're going to see a few hands go up, okay? Now, you might not think I'm as old as them, but we've been here since then, okay? Though I was this when I got here, but I remember being in this church soon thereafter when we moved, because I didn't really know anybody, of course. Who do you know when you're 3.5, 4 years old, right? You know nobody. So, and I had no brother at that point. So I knew my parents. But I remember getting to know people here early on when we first got here. We moved into the house that my mom still lives in now in January of 1980. It's in Tennis Village. Many of you have been to our house at some point. If you haven't, you might know where Tennis Village is, but 1980. And at that point, that was essentially the outskirts of what people would call Tracy. There wasn't stuff beyond that. There were houses in the country, but that was it. So it's been a long time since those days, 40 years since those days. So we lived here in the house my mom lives in since 1980. So I grew up here, started coming to church here when I was little. Some of your families have children that I was friends with growing up. Some of them will get mentioned later on. But from an early age, so of course I went to kindergarten here at church, primary, juniors, youth. Some of the teachers I had, Becky Lanza, Wes Huffman. At some point, Kim, Frank / Riddle now. So you can see, while things have changed, some things have remained the same over that time. But I was here at this church growing up with my brother and with many, many families that had many, many kids. There was a multitude of children all in the same-ish age and families that eventually moved away, some families that came in. It was awesome. It was what I knew. It was the church I grew up in. I went to school at the Tracy Seventh-day Adventist School from 2nd grade through 7th grade. Okay? So I started there my 2nd grade year. I went to kindergarten and 1st grade at Jefferson. Some of you know where Jefferson School is at. It used to be way out in the boonies, but now it's not as far. But that's where I went to kindergarten, 1st grade. Came here for 2nd grade. Now, I was a part of this school. Not all of you knew that, right? I actually didn't graduate from the school because after 7th grade, the class in the 8th grade year was big. It was like 8 people. That's big for our school. We know that, right? And most of the people that were my friends were in that class. And I knew at that point where I was going to go to high school was Modesto Adventist Academy. So I went there for 8th grade year. Okay? I left poor Rachel Huffman by herself. And then she came to Modesto the next year and joined me and many others. So I went to Modesto Adventist Academy in Modesto for high school, 4 years. And fun fact, at that point in those years when I was going to the academy, at some points we had members of the Western family, the Berwick family, the Coleman family, the Huffman family, the Ahn family, the Mustard family, the Berenci family, all attending that school at the same time. That's 7 families, okay, that were all involved at that school at the same time. That's a lot. Now, we had initially been brought there because of an 8th family, the Lanza family, because their daughter, Deborah, was the first person to make that transition and go to that school, and she's the one that started it all. But by the time I got into high school, she had just graduated. So a lot of people, a lot of familiarity in this church. And then in the years that followed, of course, more families, Igarashis, and others sent their children there. Now, when I got done with high school, I said, I'm going to college. Of course, that's a good thing. I went to college, and I graduated and went to Southwestern Adventist University. Not Southern. Please don't mistake it for Southern. Southwestern Adventist University College, or Adventist University, in Keene, Texas. When I got out of high school, my main goal was I'm going to be done with college in 4 years. I'm going to school, I'm going 4 years, and I'm going to be out. I'm not spending extra time, college 4 years, and then I'm working. So that was my mindset. Now, I went to Southwestern Adventist University in Texas with one of my friends from Modesto, who I was close to. He and I both went out there. And then later on, Jason Mustard, who grew up in this church, and my brother both also ended up going to college out there as well. My brother actually ended up going to almost every Adventist college, but I just went to Southwestern Adventist University. So I graduated from there. Now, I graduated in 4 years, but when I went to college, I loved the idea of broadcasting and PE. So my PE teacher, Greg Matthews, who is still the PE teacher at Modesto Academy, was a great influence on me. I felt like, man, teaching would be fun. My dad had actually mentioned if he hadn't been a physician, one thing he thought would be fun was to be a teacher at some point, whether it was medicine or something like that. So I always thought teaching would be cool, but I thought, man, how do they make a living? Although I had teachers, and they obviously were living in houses. But I thought, how do we make a living? And also with broadcasting, broadcasting is not a high tone. What you see and what you hear, you see the highest levels. But that's another profession where, how do they make a living? It doesn't necessarily go easy. But when I went to Southwestern, because they didn't have a PE major at the time, I majored in broadcasting. And when you major in broadcasting, essentially your minor is communications. So in order to get done in 4 years, which was my goal, I didn't do any other PE stuff at that point. So I graduated with a degree in broadcasting from Southwestern Adventist University because growing up, I loved radio, still love radio. Now podcasts, which has been the greatest possible invention over the last 20 years, it's like, it speaks to me. This is what I loved growing up. I loved the idea of radio broadcasting. I loved that. So that's what I did. And I graduated with that. Once I graduated, I got a job actually in Hawaii. Now, there's been times over the years when people have asked, am I Hawaiian? I forgot to tell you this. See, I skipped something at the beginning. My nationality is half Korean, because my father was Korean, and a whole bunch of white things. Because my mom, the most she is of anything is a quarter, which means the most I am of anything is an eighth. So when you got 50% Korean and everything else is like an eighth or less, really, I just need to tell you the Korean part. I'm half Korean, okay? So this is where the Hawaii part comes in. Because my father's family grew up in Hawaii. My dad was born in Hawaii. His grandparents came to Hawaii in the early 1900s. So while he was Korean, while I am half Korean, our Korean family has been in Hawaii for over 100 years. So that is where sometimes people know about our love for Hawaii. You know, maybe you guys haven't been the one that asked me if I was Hawaiian, but I'm asked a lot of times by students, which I'll tell you later about. So half Korean, Hawaii. I went to work in Hawaii. I got a job at a sports radio station in Hawaii where I worked for just a little less than a year. And because the management of that station was not in great shape, so when I didn't stay there long term, but it was a lot of fun. Working in for real, like have a real job. I'm an adult, and in my mind I thought so. And I'm in radio, and it was a small station, so you had to do everything. You had to run the board. You had to produce commercials. You had to go get interviews. You had to do sports reports. It was the best. It was awesome. I'll never forget it. So if you happened to be in Hawaii in 1997 to 98, and you heard like a voice, you could have heard my voice giving you a sports report. Not that any of you did, but I'm just letting you know this could have been a possibility. After I left Hawaii, I went back to Texas, to Southwestern Adventist University. And I worked there for a year and a half in the athletic department, sports information director, assistant athletic director, and in the men's dorm as assistant men's dean for the next year and a half back in Texas in athletics, sports, other things I loved. Then I went and worked for 1 year for the Dallas Mavericks. Now, this was the 1999-2000 season. I wasn't playing for them. I wasn't broadcasting for them, which would have been the best. But I worked for the Dallas Mavericks basketball team. Now, another fun fact. That was the year that Mark Cuban bought the Dallas Mavericks. During that season, he purchased the team. So some of you might know who Mark Cuban is. Not because of the Dallas Mavericks, maybe because Shark Tank. Maybe because of Dancing with the Stars. Maybe just because you follow billionaires. Whatever. But that was the owner. I'm going to fall off the stairs sometime. That was the owner. He bought the team during that season. And I was there for one season because my position was the street team coordinator and mascot coordinator. Next fun fact. The mascot at that time, Mavs Man, which is still one of the Dallas Mavericks mascots, was a graduate of Modesto Adventist Academy. The previous person who had held that position was also a graduate of the academy who then was moving back. And because there was some stuff going on at Southwestern at that time, they knew that I might be looking to possibly do something differently. And so for a year, I worked there with him and the team, and his contract was up after that year. Because, little known fact, mascots are actually under contract as well because of injuries. So in professional organizations, NBA organizations, the players, coaches, and mascots are under contract. Everybody else is just like on a regular you come to work basis. So his contract was up, and he decided he didn't want to resign. And I had been talking with people back here in this area because I wanted to go back to school and do my PE. I always had in my mind I was going to eventually sometime do PE as well. So after that year, I came back to California in the summer of 2000, after being gone since 1993 from here. And I came back and I lived in Modesto. And I went to CSU Stanislaus, and I did my PE major because I didn't have to do another degree because I already had one. And I didn't graduate. I got my PE major done, and then I did my student teaching and got my teaching credential from CSU Stanislaus. While I was doing that, I worked part-time at Modesto Academy, teaching a couple classes and coaching as well. And then I was ready to be out on my own, I thought. I did my student teaching at East Union High School in Manteca. Okay? Fun fact. Zach Huffman, his daughter, Emma, this year is a freshman at East Union High School in Manteca. So that's where I did my student teaching, and that's where I thought I was going to work. Because I was there for a year, loved it. I thought, man, this is where I want to be, East Union. It didn't work out. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit later. So I needed to find a job. I had my teaching credential, PE. I was not interested in teaching. I got my credential from CSU Stanislaus, so I didn't have my Adventist credential. And I was never interested in teaching in the Adventist system. I came through the Adventist system, but I was obviously going to teach in the public school system. And I eventually got a job at Northgate High School, miraculously, in Walnut Creek, California. And I've been teaching there since the 2003-2004 school year. How many of you weren't born in 2003? You were not born in 2003. Raise your hand if you were not born in 2003. Not born. You were not alive in 2003. Okay, not alive in 2003. It's easier. Yeah, not born throws people off. I do a better job of explaining things. So I started there in 2003, and I'm very loyal to where I'm at. Where I'm at, I'm fully in. And I've been there, and this is my 17th year at Northgate High School that I'm teaching in right now. So and I teach sophomores through seniors, high school physical education. It's a dream. It's the best. I love it. I love it probably even more now than I did when I started. Some of you right now are like, there's no way. There's no way. High school students. Oh, and by the way, it's sophomores through seniors. So 15, 16, 17, 18. Pretty much your prime area for always happy all the time. This is what I choose to do and I love to do. And I have a wonderful time doing it. So I've been there for 17 years now. Now, along the way, yes, I got married in 2010 here in this church to Beatrice, who I met actually in the year 2000. Okay, so in the year 2000, I met her when I came back to California. So I had no knowledge of her previous to that. I knew that their family had been here kind of. And then we got together in the year 2010. So we were friends for 10 years. Then we got together and then ended up getting married at the end of 2010 here in this church. So that pretty much takes, and okay, we have two daughters, a 7.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. But that takes us up to today, okay? Now, I do have to tell you, Alicia, I said, what's a strategy you have for me, Alicia? What do I need to do up here today? What do you want me to do? She goes, don't say anything that's going to make people look back at me. I said, okay. So try. The nice thing is they sat in the middle today, so only a few people could look back. I guess you could all look forward. So now, let's go to when Tyler said, okay, hey, Michael. So I get this text a few weeks ago, and I can't remember if I was at school or whatever, so I didn't see it right away. And it said, we'd be willing to preach. And my first thing was like, oh, yeah. Because over the years, I've written down like different things that I was going to, like, oh, I think I could talk about this or whatever. This would be good. I think I could, different things here and there. Don't worry, I don't want to be a pastor. Was never part of my concept, but just things. I was like, oh, I can write this down. So then I read farther down and it said, oh, yeah, it's the focus is my story, God's glory. And I was like, okay, pretty much nothing I've ever written down is going to go with that. All right, that's good. So then I thought, well, my story, what's exciting about my story? In my mind, I couldn't think of like what's exciting. But it's all right, I got to think. And then I realized that not a lot of you knew who I was or knew about my childhood growing up. Now, in this church, I did many things because when we were at that elementary school, the Pastor John Kress and his wife Karen were here a number of the years when I was in school. And when they were here, she was very involved in presentation, performing arts, people doing things up front. And so one thing we started when she was here was doing skits, like on a bi-weekly or once-a-month basis with kids from the school. We did a big Christmas program, either in 85 or 86. Tim, I know, was videoing. I've seen the video before. I actually went back and looked. It was called Salty's Christmas Calamity. And Salty is the blues singing songbook. And the great thing about that performance was when we did it from the school, it was all the kids from the school. It was really the first time we'd ever tried to do like a full-on program here. Pastor Kress, who was the pastor then, he actually was Salty. So he was the songbook. So we had the full go, everything up here. We had boxes with carpets on top of them. There weren't dance moves, but there was singing that involved movement from students that might appear to be dancing if people didn't want that. So we knew we were treading on a thin edge when we were doing this performance. But we did that, and then that led to more things happening over the years. So there was constant activity happening from the school, which obviously has continued to this day. It goes and comes and goes depending on who's teaching at the school. But I was performing and doing things up here from an early age. Then I played the piano a few times when I was growing up, because there was a few of us in the church that were growing up playing the piano. So I played the piano a few times. I never sang in the adult choir that I was talking about earlier. But when I went to high school, we came here from Modesto with our choir, with our band. So I've played up here with a full band before, playing timpani and percussion. I've sung with our choir up here. We had handbells. We did do a handbell choir here at church. Some of you probably played in that. I've played handbells here. So I was doing many things. I've done some short talks up here before, referring to other things. So I had been involved from a very early age, because I told you, I grew up here. Now, I left in 93, right? I wasn't around for a long time. Essentially, from 1993 till 2010, I wasn't a regular attending member of this church. I was attending other places, but I was gone, even though my family was still here. So a lot of you started coming here in those years. Thus, that's why I'm explaining to you who I'm about, or what I am about right now. So Tyler asked me, I know I have to have a text. So the text that I've used my entire life since my teenage years was 1 Timothy 4:12, because that meant something to me. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're too young. So Tyler this week texted me, he said, man, when I first put in the text, I accidentally put in 1 Timothy 4, or looked at 1 Timothy 4:2. So 1 Timothy 4:2, for those of you that don't have the Bible perfectly memorized, mind you, this is the first time I'm speaking up here. Tyler's asked me to. My story, God's glory. 1 Timothy 4:2 says, such teaching has come through hypocritical liars, whose consciences have been seared with a hot iron.
Amen.
So for those few seconds when he was looking at 1 Timothy 4:2, and I haven't talked to him about this, I have no idea what his thoughts were. He was probably like, oh, we got to change. We got to get another speaker. But yeah, 1 Timothy 4:12 is my text. But it's funny because 1 Timothy 4:2 is so hot and focused. But yeah. So 1992, I was a junior. Almost 28 years ago to this week, I sat out there as a junior in high school, and I got Insight Magazine. Now, Insight Magazine was something that's no longer being produced, but it was given to kids in the youth, Sabbath school. Every Sabbath, you'd get it after Sabbath school. You'd come in here, and then you'd read it, or not read it. And I read it most of the time, but not all the time. And sometimes it was interesting, sometimes not, because I was paying attention to what was going on. So this Sabbath, so it was January 18th, 1992, this is the Insight Magazine that was out, okay? So this is the My Story, God's Glory part. We're coming, what's something that happened in my life that made a big difference to my life and possibly many other people's lives. So Insight Magazine, and it was talking about our 30 most adventurous readers. What? And it had a picture on the front. A lot of you might remember, if you were Adventist a long time growing up, that they used to have like drawings of a lot of their pictures. Then they kind of started having some pictures, but this was like really interesting. There's a lot of kids sitting in a waterfall, looks like. So I open it up, and the first thing says, the ultimate workout. I'm like, what is this? And this is 1992, mind you. This was a mission trip. And the whole idea of the Ultimate Workout was that it was for teens that want to go on trips that they don't put the older adults on, that go into areas that most people don't want to stay in. And it's a trip that you build. You go to another country and you build, and it's students from all over the United States and Canada. So me growing up, I never was interested in mission work at all, which is funny because my parents were missionaries. My mom grew up being a missionary daughter. They moved all over the world. It just didn't interest me at all. My Grandma Ahn, my dad's mom, was always like, oh, you should be mission. I wasn't interested. But when I saw this, I was like, this is something. Because what drew me to it was the fact that it was people my age that I didn't know. And that is exciting. Now, maybe for some of you, that's like the least exciting thing in your life. You would never want to go somewhere with a whole bunch of people you didn't know to build something, and who knows what happens, right? So this was excitement. I went home that day. There's a thing at the back here that you had to, back in the day, you had to send in even to get an application. This was only going to be the second Ultimate Workout. So when the Ultimate Workout first started, it was a very small, singular group, like 25, 30 people max. And so I was like, man, I want to be a part of this. So let me send it for the application. So I sent in the application, or to get the application. It came. I filled that out because I didn't know it was a guarantee. It wasn't a guarantee, right? This was the first year. I want to do it. It said the next year they were going to go July 22 to August 3, 1992 to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. I said, I got to be there. I got to be there. That was going to be the summer between my junior and senior year in high school, okay? So I was 17. So I write, I send in, I fill out the application, I send it in, and listen, I was so about this. I wanted to do this so badly because I wanted to go meet people and do this. This is what was exciting to me. I know from my family, they're like, this is awesome. He's actually excited about doing something like this, but it's different because now you got to send your own child off away, which a lot of you want to do, but you send them away to another country where they're going to meet people all from all over and you're going to build and do all this stuff. So I still remember the day that we got something in the mail back. And it was like a letter. So I'm like, what if I don't get accepted? It's going to be so, So I opened it up and it said I was accepted so I could go on this trip. And I was so excited. Because by that time, you need to understand, like I had read through this so many times. And in this one, because there were so few people on it, they would have like these quotes. So like by that time I went on the trip, I could tell you, oh, Nancy Dunn, she said this. And this guy, he said this. Because I had read it so many times because I wanted so much to be a part of it. So I went on that mission trip. And a long time ago, 1992. And it was awesome. It was also a moment where one of the most meaningful things happened in my life. Sometime later we could talk about that. But on that trip, there was a lightning strike that hit 8 members of our group and killed 1 member of our 27 people that went on that trip. So it was pretty much the biggest tragedy I've ever been through. So most of you would think, okay, well, that's pretty much where the mission trips ended then. No, it was still an unbelievable experience. And my parents were even willing to allow me to go back the next year, right? So in 1993, I ended up in that summer being able to go back on the Ultimate Workout. And they actually still ran the trip, which was a miracle in itself. And I went in 1993, and I went in 1994. And in 1995, it had gotten so popular that they had 100-something people all in one group. So I went from like 27 to 40 to 45 to 100. And my brother actually went in 1995. Now, by this time, I was locked in. And in 1996, the trip had gotten so popular that they said we're going to break it into four groups. Now, this was unheard of to us because those of us who've been going for like 4 years, we said, how can they do this? They can't do this. That's not right. You can't break this trip into groups. But there were so many people that wanted to go, so they said we're going to break it into groups. Now, during that year, when they said they were going to break it into groups, so obviously there was a few of us that had been multiple times, not from this church, but me from here and other people from other areas. So we went in 96. And 96 is when they first made the Ultimate Workout into 4 separate groups. And Dan Scow was a member of this church along with his parents for many, many years. Some of you in here know him. Some of you don't know him because he hasn't been here since you've been here. And he is and was then a nurse. And so the first time they broke the trip up to go, I remember telling him, man, you should go. You should be one of the nurses because they need nurses on this thing. He was like, yeah, kind of, I might. So those of you that knew Dan growing up, he was wishy-washy. Like, yeah, I want to, I'm not sure. So I knew I was going. Ended up he didn't go. No problem. So I go in 96. And in 1996, one of the things that plays into this so young story comes into play. So in 96, the group that I was in was led by a younger female who hadn't been on the trip before. So the other three groups were all led by people who'd been before. And so the leadership on our site was younger and female. And you'll never guess, people thought we weren't going to do well. Shocking, right? Kind of plays into today's world a little bit. So the other groups had people that were more experienced. We had a group of guys and girls, a few guys that had been before, and our one leader was someone who had never been before, and she was a younger female. So then the groups met together after a few days on the Sabbath. So you separate from your group, and you met together, and we heard from some other people that we knew in other groups, like, oh, we heard your group has problems. We heard your group's not doing well. We were like, what? What are you talking about? We're fine. We're good. We're doing great. We're building fine. But here's what happened. It upset us, right? Why are you looking down on us? Why you say, just because you think we're younger, just because you think our leader hasn't been before, you're going to say you think we're having problems? We're not having problems. Now, we were having some problems with the older gentleman who was our building coordinator, but not problems that involved us actually getting stuff done. But we took that as a challenge. Because when you get challenged in life, there's really two ways to go. Fight or flight. You're either going to take the challenge or you're going to walk away quietly. Sometimes not quietly, but you'll walk away. So we were like, are you kidding me? We're fine. We're good. So we continued to build. We continued to bust our tails because our goal was like, we're not going to let anybody say we're not doing well. We are good. So at the end of that trip, we actually finished our site, our building, our church building, before the other three groups. We finished a whole day earlier. And so on the final day of that trip, some of us, me and a couple other guys, got sent to other groups to help them finish because they'd had some big sickness issues. But the point was we finished ours a day early, right? We weren't going to let anybody tell us, well, you can't do this. You're too young. You're led by a woman. You can't do that. So we didn't. And in our mindset, that was us showing, you're not going to tell us we're too young. You're not going to tell us we can't do stuff. And we don't want people to put us in a box and say, because you're young, led by someone who hasn't been here before, we think you might have some issues. So that text, 1 Timothy 4:12, has, since that point in my life, been one of the ones I will always go back to. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're too young. So that mission trip ends. Later years, I'm still trying to get Dan Scout to go. I didn't go the next 2 years because I graduated from college. I was in Hawaii. I was then back in Texas. I'm still trying to get Dan to go. Telling him. And a couple of times he said, I think I'll go, and I won't go. Then I'm trying to get my mom to go because she also was a nurse. I'm saying, hey, they need nurses because every group had to have a nurse. Every group had to have a building coordinator. Every group had to have a construction superintendent. Every group had to have a cook. Every group had to have all these different things. So eventually, in 1999, my mom and Dan Scow, members of this church, went on the trip as well as myself. I was living in Texas then. I went. I was in one group. Dan Scow was a nurse in another group. My mom was a nurse in another group. So that was the part of the key of the ultimate workout. You go on it, you split apart from people you know. I didn't want to be around people I was grew up with. You want to be meeting other people. So they started going in 99. They went in 2000. Dan continued to go every year. By the next year, he was a project coordinator. So he didn't want to go, then he became a project coordinator. In the years that followed, members of this church went. Lillian Coleman as a cook multiple times. Wes Huffman went at least 2, if not 3 times. 3. My brother went again. Some lady named Beatrice Ortiz at that point, in 2002, I convinced her to go as a translator because every group had to have a translator as well, because a translator would then help translate the sermons, help when you would go to town to get anything, because usually we were in Spanish-speaking countries, whether it was Central America or South America. So she went. Of course, we were just friends at this time. In 2004, this is the one time it was different. Me, my brother, my mom, Beatrice, and another fun fact, Jessica Shine, who used to be the pastor here, all of us were in the same group in 2004. Beatrice, the translator, I was always one of the assistant helpers, and then I would run the cement mixer. My mom was the nurse. My brother Kevin was the cook. We had it all going on. Okay? That was 2004. In the years that followed, other people in our church, the Laban family, the Yadao family, went on this trip. Now, when I thought about this, the My Story, God's Glory, my thinking was like, so what if I don't go on that trip? What if I didn't get excited in 1992? I wasn't directly responsible for everybody going, but I'm pretty sure if I never went, I know Dan's never going. I know my mom's never going. And if they're never going, how is anybody ever going to be convinced, hey, this might be a good thing. Hey, this is something you should send your kid to. So that made a difference to my life. Some of my closest friends I met on that trip, right? My closest friends now. They live all around the country. I don't know how it changed everybody else's lives, but those of you who have family members that have gone on that trip before, it changed. It's something different. And if you never had done it, would you have done things differently, right? We don't know. That's big picture stuff, and that's why God's wonderful. Because in my mind, I was like, ooh, I'm excited. I want to go on this trip. Could I have ever imagined that it would lead to multiple people from this church going and doing those things? No. Funny other fact, Crystal, one of her sisters, I don't know her sisters, one of her sisters' ex-boyfriends, I know from the Ultimate Workout because I was on a site with him for a couple of years. The Adventist community, people all say it's really small. And it is. You always meet people that you know. Like, how would I have ever known these things, right? Except for talking about it with people. So that is one big thing in life that was my story, God's glory. Now, that leads to me being gone from this church for many, many years. Came back here in 2010. Here. I went to San Ramon Church for many years. Fun fact, another one. Mike McKeon, who now is a member of our church here, I met him at San Ramon. I started singing in a praise band at San Ramon, and he was there at some point and then was playing in the praise band there. So I was at San Ramon. I just wasn't regularly here in Tracy. So we come back in 2010, got married, been here essentially since then. We lived in San Ramon for a while. Then we moved to Livermore. Then we moved to Mountain House. We're moving this way, this closer. So this church has been in my entire life. Then we get to a couple of years ago. And Tyler, one time after a potluck, we were in the Better Living Center. And he says, hey, talked about it. I don't know what meeting this was because I wasn't a part of it. And we would like you to become a church elder. People think that you would be a good person to do this. And the first thing that actually went off my mind, I'm like, elder? What's elder do? My mom was an elder. What does she do? She does a lot of things. Is that elders? Is it just because she does a lot of things? I don't know. So all this is happening in my mind, like, while that's going on. So I go, okay, all right. Well, let me know what, I need to do. And, so he says, you're going to be an elder in training. Okay, all right. And there's you and this person, we're going to be elders in training. Okay. So, fine. I go home, I tell Beatrice. And then, later that week, he calls me, or I get a call from Tyler. And I'm like, oh, hey. And he says, and I can tell he's not super comfortable. He's not like, hey, how you doing? It's good. He's, so, about the elder. I'm like, yeah. Well, there's some people, obviously, have to be in the church because he wouldn't make the decision unless it was. They feel like you need maybe an extra year of training. I was like, extra year? What did I do? So I'm like, an extra year? Because normally, I guess typically it's 1 year. So I was like, huh? I said, what's the deal? He said, well, maybe someone said, there was something about, like, maybe they don't know if you've taught Sabbath school before. I'm like, Sabbath school before? Okay. So at that point, I'm like, all right, okay. So I hang up with them, because we weren't doing anything that night, right? So we're still going to the elders meetings once a month. And there was a point where I thought, now why am they saying, what did I not do well enough? What have I not done? What would I do that's going to make people think like I, who have been here for 40 years, right? I'm not young. I mean, I still believe I'm young, but I'm not young, right? So I've been here 40 years. I'm like, okay, let's see. I've been doing skits since I was a little kid, singing. I played in band, choir, bill choir. I've helped with beginners. No one would know that unless you had a kid in there, because how would you see me over there? Played the piano for beginners, taught beginners one time when there was no teacher there. I've done talks up front. I've done all these things. And I'm like, is part of the job description that you must teach Sabbath school to become an elder? I looked it up. I have not yet found that. You can look it up. You go home today, you look it up. You look job description for elder in Seventh-day Adventist Church. You will not find a place that goes, must teach Sabbath school in order to become an elder. Because the whole idea for me is like, you want elders, if the elder's supposed to help the pastor and help the church, you want them to be a well-rounded group. And this is what you want with any team, with any business. You don't want everyone to be the same. Look around this church. Not everyone looks the same. Not everyone's from the same cultural background. Not everyone's the same mindset. We have people who specialize in music. We have people who specialize in sound. We have people who specialize in speaking. People who specialize in praying. People who specialize in teaching Sabbath school. All those things are important, right? Everything is important. Because if you had only people who played music, we'd have fights every week on who's going to play the music. Diana would be warding them off with a violin or whatever, but we'd have fights. If you had only people who taught Sabbath school, and that's it, well, I guess church would be pretty short. If only you taught Sabbath school and there was no one to sing. So at some points I did think, man, is this for me? Maybe I shouldn't do this. But then I thought, hold on a second here. 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're too young. Now, I'm not young, but I'm 43. I was 43, I think, at the time. A young 43 at the time. But think, hold on a second. If people are still looking at me like I'm young, and I know those of you who've been here since I was a little kid, you still look at me like I'm young. I get it, right? So if I'm 40s, what are people in their 30s and 20s going to do? And what's someone who just got here to the church going to do after 10 years if they think I'm not ready and I've been around for 40? So I could have said, it's not for me. People don't want me to. They think I'm not ready, whatever, whatever the reason. I'll walk away. It's fine. It's not for me. I could have, but also in the back of my mind, I like being challenged, right? I like when there's like something, you can't do this? Oh, really? Okay, well, let me see if I can. My mindset was, if I do that, the devil likes to make people doubt, right? In whatever manner it comes in. Just put doubt in people's mind. If I can put doubt in your mind, I've put it there. So now it's there. It might not be there big, but once it's there, right? So when things happen at our school, at our church, usually it's not big, humongous things. It's not like the church falls down one day. It's little things. Little things happen. So part of my mindset was, I'm not going to let this deter my feeling in my life for what I want to do. Because if I do that, I'm going against everything I've believed in since I was a teen, right? Also, what am I going to tell my girls later on? Hey, man, when I was challenged, you know what I did? I said, nah, it's not important. It's all right. That's not the mindset I want to have. See, we need people with all these talents. We need people in this church with multiple talents. In life, you need to be around as many well-rounded people as you can be. Because that's the only way you get a good team. In athletics, you can't have a team of everybody that does the same position. You can't have a team that everyone has the same mindset. You can't do that. In business, same thing. There's top level, entry level, mid-level, all those things. So when it comes to you and your lives, you're going to have those moments where people talk about talents. And so I look around our church, and we are missing a lot of people in their 40s. We're missing a lot of people in their 30s. We're missing a lot of people in their 20s. That's a problem. So I don't want people to think that I'm too young. Because if people think I'm too young, what are the next 3 generations going to do, right? We can't be hiding our talents. If you have a talent, you have to bring it forth in life, but here in this church. So there's a saying. It's not a saying. Roy T. Bennett. Now, if I was like Tyler, I would have it on the screen. But I'm not like Tyler. I don't have it on the screen. So the book is The Light in the Heart. Maybe some of you have heard it or read this person before. The quote is, "You are unique. You have different talents and abilities. You don't have to always follow in the footsteps of others. And most important, you should always remind yourself that you don't have to do what everyone else is doing and have a responsibility to develop the talents you have been given." This is true for everything you're going to do, ever. You all have talent. You all have something you can do. Now, it might not be something in the church, because understand me, there was never any point in my life when I was growing up where I said, man, someday I want to be in church administration. No. In fact, administration of anything, I don't want any part of, right? School administration, want nothing to do with. Church administration, in my mind, I was like, ah. But it happened, right? I'm back. I like doing things. Some people felt like they wanted me to be in that spot. So my goal is to do the best I can for the people who've asked me to do it. So my story, God's glory, I don't think I have like one little thing that's happened. But there are things that have happened that have changed my life, came about because of this church. There are things that have happened that have changed other people's lives that came about because of this church. So if I could get you to take anything home with you, is number one, everybody's got different things that happen to them in lives. I am not the same as anybody else out there. Okay? I'm not. I'm probably a mix of my mom and my dad. If you knew my father and you do know my mother, yeah, I'm going to have a personality for sure. Okay? I'm going to be outgoing for sure. But I'm different than them. So I am happy to have told you a little bit about myself. I hope that if anything you get from today, if it makes you want to go on a mission trip, that's awesome. That's great. That wasn't the main goal. The main goal is for you to get comfortable with who I am. But the biggest thing is, don't let anybody tell you you're too young. Because if you're in your 60s, you're not too young. Your 70s, you're not too young. Your 80s, you're not too young. If you got something, use it. If people need something and you know you can do it, a worse talent is a hidden talent. Because a hidden talent's a wasted talent. That means you don't ever tell anybody you can do it. Like imagine if you were the best auto mechanic in the world. You're the best in the world. You're Zach. You're the best in the world auto mechanic. And someone goes, man, I really need someone to fix a car around here. I really need this. And Zach doesn't even tell him that that's what he does. That's a waste, right? Like we have people here that can do many, many things. The church is made on people from all shapes, sizes, cultures. So please understand, I am not young. Kind of for this church, I still am a little bit. But my hope is that anybody who is younger than me doesn't ever lose faith or hope that they could be a key part of a church or an organization or something. Don't tell yourself you can't do it. And don't let people put doubt in your mind about something. And I don't care if you're 60s or 70s. Don't let people put doubt in your minds. Because the second you doubt, it's there. Don't let it be there. God will change your life. He changed my life. He has changed other people's lives. Good things can happen. I thank you so much. Now let's have some wonderful singing.